I used to teach math at a community college, and one thing that I would frequently tell my students is the secret to being good at math is to be lazy. Now, why would I say such a thing? Well, it's really not so much being lazy, but it's looking for better ways to do things. Let me give you an example. Frequently, when I saw students working on a problem, they'd be very cookbook about it. They would, follow step 1, step 2, they'd have all the steps written down, and they'd slavishly adhere to that process, instead of asking themselves, okay, maybe I can combine these 2 steps or something. And the result is they often did a lot of extra work that they could have saved themselves if they had just thought about, well, why not factor first or something like that, and then it'll make it easier down the road. So I think part of the problem is most students are not used to doing math, and so they don't have the experience, and so they're very much dependent on processes and not so much on critical thinking. I think that part of the problem is students simply lack the experience and the familiarity with the subject matter or with the process, so they're very much stuck to following a script or a recipe, if you will. And so they say, okay, first step I got to do this, second step I got to do that. And so they're following a rote process. They're not stopping to think about, well, hey, wait a minute, instead of doing this, and this, maybe I can combine those. Instead of doing 3 steps, do 1 step. Now, I think a lot of that comes with time, comes with experience. But of course, a lot of students, they don't want to put in the work to get to that point, right? They don't want to do their homework. They want to know the bare minimum to get by. So, even though I would tell them this advice, very few paid heed to it. Okay. But I think it illustrates a principle that goes beyond math. You may say, oh, I hate math, I don't want anything to do with math. Forget about the math, that's just an application. What is the principle? The principle is very basic. Work smarter, not harder. And you'll hear this advice echoed in a lot of videos on YouTube or in self-help or that kind of stuff. It's not really about math. It's just an illustration of a broader principle, one that can help you regardless of what topic you're talking about or what you're engaged in actually. And that principle is work smarter, not harder. Always ask yourself, is there something that I can do to facilitate things? Try to look at the big picture. Look at the forest rather than focusing in on the trees, right? Because a lot of times if you understand the big picture, then you'll be able to see, well, wait a minute. Instead of going like this in your process, you can streamline things, cut out unnecessary steps or cut out repetitive steps. That's what I meant when I was talking to my students. But I think most of them, because they already had a math phobia or they just had a hatred of math or whatever, or just completely indifferent, they didn't pay any attention to that. But I think it's something that we can all use. Work smarter, not harder. I think that perhaps one reason why people do not apply this more often is, for one, like I've already mentioned, they simply lack the experience or the familiarity with the subject at hand, or the process, or whatever it is that they're engaged with. And there's no question that the more used to doing something you are, the more you can see that you can, do something a little bit different and save some time, that type of thing. But a bigger factor is, I believe, the lack of critical thinking among many people. And I think that's something that is a much bigger issue, one that has implications for all of society. A lot of people are content to just not think deeply about whatever it is, whether it be the issues of the day or how they work or how they interact with other people. They don't think critically at all. They don't think, they just accept what somebody tells them. One reason why I say this is because I have witnessed it in my teaching. A lot of students, they don't want to think. Whenever I went over topics in class and, gave example problems or whatever, they would not think about what they're doing. And as a matter of fact, they absolutely hated it when I tried to ask them questions about a problem. For example, look at the information that you have. How can you use this information? Questions like that, trying to get them to analyze the information that they have and then put it together in some way and utilize it. They just absolutely hated that. They'd tell me stuff like, oh, well, if I already knew how to do it, I wouldn't be here asking you how to do it. And sometimes they practically wanted me to do their homework for them, and I just put my foot down and I said, hey, I'm here to help you, but I'm not going to do your work for you. I'm not going to think for you. Anyways, that was not very well received. They didn't want to think. They just wanted me to tell them step one, step two, do this, plug in that, boom. Sometimes the lack of critical thinking is so tremendous, it's unbelievable. And I don't know how many times I've had students, I ask them to work on a problem and they whip out their calculator, punch in a bunch of stuff, and they'd say, oh, the answer is 49. And I say, well, where did you get that from? It was clear. I knew clearly it was a wrong answer. No way it could be at all the correct answer based on whatever the situation was. And they say, well, my calculator says that's what the answer is. Because they don't have that understanding, because they're not thinking critically, they just punch away a bunch of keys in the calculator and say, oh, well, the calculator gave me that answer, therefore it must be right. Not stopping at all to think about, is this logical? Does this answer make sense? One time, for example, on a quiz, I gave a very simple, basically a conversion of units problem, and it was basically was related to if hair grows at such and such length. I think it's like, what is it? I think it's like 0.4 inches in a month or something like that. Well, and the person goes for 6 weeks or whatever without getting a haircut, or in between haircuts, how much does the hair grow? Some problem like that. I put that on a quiz, and one student gave me some totally outrageous answer, like 49 feet or whatever it was. And I was like, come on, stop and think about it. Does that answer make sense? It never entered the student's mind because no critical thinking. That's the type of thing that I'm talking about. I've seen it firsthand. And I fear that it will only get worse with an over-reliance on computers to do everything, because computers are so smart, right? computers can do everything. And so they just park their brain somewhere and don't bother using it, right? That would really frustrate me. And I see it a lot, even like with, think about this, how many people use actual maps when they're driving? They use GPS. They're not thinking. If the GPS says turn left, then they turn left, and they don't think about, well, is this really the right way to go? The GPS isn't God. The GPS can make mistakes based on outdated information or some kind of malfunction, who knows? So just because you use computers or whatever as a tool, you don't want them to become a crutch. And back to my students with math problems, for example, they didn't use the calculator as a tool, they used it as a crutch. And they turned off their brain and said, oh, well, the calculator said this, therefore it must be right. Oh, it drove me crazy, it really did. But anyways, that's all ties back to what I was talking about before, about working smarter, not harder. You cannot, there's a gnat or something flying around. You simply cannot work smarter if you're not going to use your brain, if you're not going to sit and look at the information that you're given and ask yourself, how does this all fit together? Can it be put together another way? Can I do something different than what the textbook or what my boss or whoever tells me to do? A lot of people are too afraid to step outside their comfort zone. And like I said, I understand that a lot of times this is due to a lack of familiarity with whatever it is that you're dealing with. But the only way to overcome that is to expose yourself to such situations more and more. And then you get comfortable with it. And then you're able to see the forest instead of all the trees. So, I hope I've given you something to think about. I hope that you can use this fact in whatever it is, whatever situation you're facing in life. Like I said, it's nothing to do with math, really. There's the broader picture here. Again, don't focus on the tree. Look at the whole forest. Work smarter, not harder. So, if you did get anything out of this, please give this video a thumbs up and share it with your friends, subscribe, and let's have a discussion in the comments below. Have you noticed the lack of critical thinking, for example? Or what have you done to apply this principle of work smarter, not harder? Let me know. I'll talk to you later. Bye.